In this episode of Home Theater Geeks, I continue my conversation with Mike Heiss, who attended the 2024 CEDIA Expo in Denver, Colorado. In this episode, we talk about the video products that were there. So stick around.
Podcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is TWiT.
Hey there, Scott Wilkinson here, the Home Theater Geek. In this episode, I continue my conversation with Mike Heiss, who attended the 2024 CEDIA Expo in Denver, Colorado, September 8th, 6th to 8th, something like that. Anyway, early in September. And
5th to 7th.
5th to 7th, thank you very much. And there we have the disembodied, now embodied voice of Mike Heiss, journalist, consultant, and jolly good CEDIA Fellow. Hey, Mike, welcome back.
Hey, Scott, good to be back. It's, I went to CEDIA. I took one for the team.
You did take one for the team. I was unable to go, and so I value greatly your ability to come and tell us all about it. So like I said before, it was in Denver, Colorado. We just want to show quickly the convention center entrance lobby that was there. It's a very beautiful space that I have been to many times, and it really, it's big. And the show filled it up pretty much, didn't it?
It did. It was, this is what I would call a small, mid, high, let me go back. A small, mid, high, small show. Figure about 22,000 attendees. But because of the nature of the demo rooms that we were talking about in the last episode, it does, take up a lot of floor space. Yeah. There weren't many big booths, but there were a lot of booths because the things that we're not talking about here, which a lot of the people go for, are things like Crestron, one of the biggest booths, or, all the bits and pieces that a company needs to put together not just a home theater, but a total integrated residential environment.
Right.
Those companies were all there.
Right. And some of them are huge.
Crestron.
For example, Crestron, which makes control systems for not only home theater, but also
everything. If you see a podium at an event and there's somebody clicking something, there's probably a Crestron in there.
Yeah. Okay, but we're going to talk about video products today, and you have to. We have to. Sorry. But one of the biggest announcements, I think, was from Epson, who is famous for their LCD projectors. And for the most part, they have been aiming at the mid to lower end of the price spectrum.
Yep.
But at this show, they went big. They showed 3 new projectors in the Q series, all of which use a laser light source. They're 4K resolution with pixel shifting, or pixel wiggling, as sometimes we say. Did you get a chance to see these, Mike?
Yes, I did, and they were actually pretty good. And even the one that's over on the far right, which is that looks like a classroom projector, because picture that turned upside down, pointing at a whiteboard, and you're at almost every classroom in the country. I did see them, and they were quite good.
Good.
And they were in a high ambient light environment.
Well, which makes sense because they are super bright. The lowest end one, the QB1000, is 3,300 lumens. The QL3000 is the mid-range, and that's at 6,000 lumens for $15,000, not including the lens.
Well, but that's not atypical in the CEDIA world, because you're given a room and you want to make sure that you can fill the screen, but you want to be able to put the projector where you want to fit the screen size that you need. And there's a lot of lens shifting, but not the kind of lens shift that you usually talk about.
Right. Also, then at the high end, let me bring up my notes here. The QL7000,
That was bright.
10,000 lumens.
Yep.
Man. And the price? $30,000 without a lens.
Which puts it in the same category, and I know we'll talk about it shortly, as the JVCs.
Yes, exactly. So it's not uncommon in the CEDIA world, but it is uncommon for Epson.
Well, and in the more consumer-driven, DIY-ish kind of world.
Yeah.
The reality is, if you're going to spend $15,000 or $30,000 more on a projector, you're going to have somebody, if you can afford that projector, you can have somebody come and put it in for you.
That's right.
And in fact, you probably, especially if you have to pick the right lens, you want to make sure that you're putting the right tires on your car.
Right.
Or it's not going to go very far or work very well.
Right. Okay, another company that introduced some new projectors was Sony. We mentioned this in the last episode, the Bravia 9 and Bravia 8.
And the Bravia 9, coincidentally, is $32,000.
$32,000.
Oh, how'd that happen?
Yeah.
And so they're creating sort of a new, not a new category, but it clearly, if you've got three big companies putting new products in that price band, they're not doing it just to hope that it catches some buyers. There was some research that was done, so I think that indicates the health of that segment of the market. Right,
exactly so. And the other company that is big in that market is JVC.
Yes.
They announced 4 new models in May, so these aren't new at the show. But they're the first new models from JVC in 2 years. They're laser illuminated, 8K with pixel shifting.
And they're DILA, which is interesting because you've got LCD in the Epsons, laser illuminated. You've got SXRD in the Sonys, which is... Yeah, go ahead.
Is the same thing as DILA, or a variation of...
Same technology.
Same technology as light... liquid crystal,
some damn thing or another,
reflective. So
yes, they're little baby mirrors, but it's a liquid crystal type of thing,
right? And
the DILA, which going way back to the beginning of a solid state projection as opposed to CRTs, that was one of the original technologies, the DILA,
right?
Which they've improved dramatically. Yeah.
So they've got these new projectors, and I didn't get the pricing on them.
The one of them is about 30. So there you go.
So there you go. Again, we're in the $30,000 range.
But there's two interesting things in the notes that we were talking about before we went on the air here. It was interesting that one of them is native 4K without pixel shift, and that pixel shift. And that is a distinct differentiation still between that and the LCDs that Epson is using.
Yes.
Not doing a good or bad judgment, just a statement of fact.
Yeah.
The Sonys and the JVCs are native.
Right.
The Epsons are not.
Correct.
But they also have the 8K pixel shift, which it was good, and it was damn bright. I mean, it was really good, and augmented by the fact that the audio, as we mentioned previously in that room, was by our friend Anthony Gramani, so it was pretty good. But there's two interesting things that you note in about the JVCs.
Yeah.
The projectors have filmmaker mode. And for those of you who, I'm sure you've talked about filmmaker mode, why would Barry Sonnenfeld like filmmaker mode?
Because it turns off motion interpolation.
Bingo.
And all the other quote-unquote enhancements, which actually ruin the picture.
Don't be here to help me. Let me turn it off. And that's with filmmaker mode. But the other interesting thing that caught my eye was the 48 gig HDMI, which is the upper range of HDMI. And in other parts of my life, I'm involved in configuring some products now that will have HDMI 2.1. And one of the people that I met, off of the journalism track at CEDIA was one of the companies that makes the chips that you need for doing HDMI. And most of the chips that most of the AVRs use, particularly if there's anything other than a one in, one out, are going to be 40, not 48.
And Sony projectors have long been 40 gigabits per second. And just so everybody understands, we're talking about this bit rate or bandwidth of the data going down the HDMI cable. HDMI 2.0 maxes out at 18 gigabits per second. HDMI 2.1 maxes out at 48 gigabits per second. But a lot of companies, as Mike, as you just mentioned, use chips that only go to 40. And
nobody will know the difference.
Nobody will know the difference, except
because there are no sources.
Yeah, right. That require 48.
The only person that would know is Joe Kane because he wants 444, 24-bit or whatever.
Right.
But there is no source material for that, although it is worth mentioning just as we were putting this show together, Sony announced the PlayStation 5 Pro, which does have 8K support, but I don't know if it's 40 or 48.
Okay. Well, this is a little note, a little lesson in HDMI bandwidth. The last front projector that I want to mention is the Barco Heimdall, which is their attempt to do a home cinema projector. They're mostly in commercial cinema projectors. This is a single DLP 4K with no pixel shifting, red, green, and blue lasers that alternate shining onto the one DLP chip. 6,000 lumens. It does virtually 100% of the BT 2020 color space, which is really, really good.
Because a lot of the other ones are just P3.
Correct, which is a smaller color space. Still larger than HDTV, but anyway. And the cost, only $60,000.
So here's the question. If you were an installer, and then this is what those folk do. And I was going to say guys, but there are some very good installation firms run by women, and some of them would come up and slap me if I kept saying CEDIA guys.
Right.
But here's a projector, this Barco Heimdall, which is 60 grand, 6,000 lumens. Well, I can get 6,000 lumens for 15 grand or 10,000 lumens for 30 grand from Epson, and similarly from JVC and Sony.
Yep.
So you'll look at the specs and you say, is having an RGB laser something that you want? Okay, there's something to be said for that. Do you need BT 2020? Is it going to make a difference? And that's one of the things that I am involved with through CEDIA Education. What's the right, and the people that are watching this, I would suspect are more people that are into doing it themselves, which is great, which just because it's more expensive and it has more stuff, it's better, but is it better for the application?
Right. Or is it twice as much better?
Where's the point of diminishing returns?
Correct. Exactly so. Okay, then let's take a look at a few ultra short throw projectors. These are the projectors that you place right up against the wall, and it shoots at a very steep angle up onto the wall, and the image then appears hopefully on a screen on the wall. You don't want to just shoot onto the wall because that's going to look lousy.
And sometimes an ALR screen.
It has to be an ALR screen and a screen that specifically takes light in from a steep angle and reflects it back out perpendicular to the wall out into the audience. So Hisense had their laser TV. Was that new at the show? Do you know?
I don't know. They were. It was strange. That was sort of a small booth, and I cropped this image down. I should have showed the whole thing. This wasn't a big booth, and it was in the open floor, and it had a little hood over it, and you could see, for some light control. But note that it was 8K. I think that may have been at CES, but I wouldn't say that for certainty.
Right.
But for what it was and for how I was viewing it there, it was a good picture. There's no question about it.
Mm-hmm. Another thing about UST projectors is that they are often, especially with an ambient light rejecting screen, they're good in ambient light environments. So in your living room.
Because you're right up on top of it.
Because you're right up on top of it.
Or the projector is right on top of the screen.
Yeah, or right below it.
Yeah, well, right.
Samsung had their Premier series. I don't think that was new either, though.
No, there's two new Samsungs I believe were new.
Oh, they were?
Yeah.
Okay, the Premier 7, I don't have a picture of it, unfortunately.
They again, this was one of the things that you asked me before about the show, and things are getting better to the point where it's harder to say sometimes you can and sometimes you can't. That one was really good. That's the one you got to buy. There wasn't as much of that as there was in the past because everything is getting better. The rising tide has indeed raised all projectors.
Including UST projectors.
To be sure.
Okay. Let's see. Oh, the one UST projector that I wanted to mention, and we do have a picture of that, is the AWOL, A-W-O-L.
The guys with the weirdest name in this category.
Right, called the Vision Vanish. Now, this is actually their LTV 3500 Pro ultra short throw projector sitting in an enclosure. And this is what we're seeing here is a promo shot from them. It's this big giant enclosure that sits on your floor, and in addition to the projector that is sitting in the middle of this enclosure and actually motorizes out a little bit when you turn it on, the screen rolls up from the enclosure and forms this screen.
They've been showing that approach. I think that is almost AWOL's signature.
Oh.
That they've been showing that approach to the screen that rolls down into an enclosure for quite a number of years. And they've staked out a pretty good space in the market for that. And the products are good. And it's something where, again, this is something that sort of crosses over between, is it a DIY-ish thing or is it a thing for a professional? Because, you can take it off the truck and unpack it and you don't have to worry about the screen because the screen's there. So it's a very clever approach, and they have, to their credit, made quite a thing over the past few years that they have really improved the optical path and the quality of the optics and all the components that go into that. So, it may be a brand that people haven't heard of, but they've established themselves quite favorably in the market.
Yeah, yeah. You can buy this thing with a 100-inch or 120-inch diagonal screen for $15,000 or $16,000, respectively.
Yep.
And it has a built-in audio system with a 5.1 wireless speaker system that uses the speaker in the enclosure itself as a center channel. It's pretty cool.
But the way they displayed it on the floor, it was sort of in the lower light area of the floor, but it wasn't the kind of thing where you could do what was it, Grandpa Simpson in the old THX trailer, turn it up. You couldn't do that. They wouldn't let you do it. Right. So I didn't have the ability to. I saw it and it looked good, but I can't comment on the audio just because of where it was sited and the inability to turn it up.
Right. Okay, moving on to what we often call micro LED or DV LED, or what you have now started calling hard screen.
As a category.
But micro LED are these panels that you put together, tiles that you put together into very large screens. Quantum Media Systems, we talked about that in the last episode. They have their XDR Pro Cinema Video Wall. It was in several booths at the show, right?
It was just in one or two.
Well, they had they had an 18-footer in Kaleidoscape booth. And a 20-footer in their big demo, and I think they said, I read that they had a 10-footer in their own booth.
It was really good. I mean,
it's really good.
It's really good, and that's just one of those no hands down. But in fairness, Planar was there, and Planar, if anybody watched NBC's Olympics coverage, all of the direct view LED screens that they used behind not only the people that were in Paris, but the people that were in Stanford. Yeah, I saw the Olympics, but I anchored it from Stanford, Connecticut.
Right.
All of those guys, the screens behind them were all from Planar, and they're very big in the broadcast world. Sony was there. Planar was there.
At CEDIA.
Digital projection, that's sort of being strange that they're also in the direct view LED business, as is Christie and Barco. But the ones that were big up, and I'll get slapped by the PR guys. And lest we forget, LG and Samsung.
Oh, of course. They also have their direct view
LEDs. And Samsung showed, they hinted at this, and I think they did show it at CES, an 88-inch direct view LED.
Yes.
Which is, you usually think of these things, the wall, which is their sort of trade name for their direct view LED products, are typically for 4K 146 inches. Because you remember, the resolution depends on how many modules you have.
Right.
And it's not like a projector can be any size and the resolution is determined, or a projection screen can be any size and the resolution is determined by the projector. That's not the same with direct view LED.
Right.
But they did show an 88, but like you still can't afford it. I can't afford it.
It's still $100,000.
Right, and that's cool, but that's a technology that is very big, but it's not consumer ready. And it is worth noting at this juncture the difference between micro and mini.
Yes.
And the direct view LEDs are micro.
Micro LEDs.
Because they did a teeny tiny
They're super
LEDs.
tiny. Yes.
Super duper duper tiny. And mini LED, which is what you'll typically find as the backlight array, the BLU, backlight unit, for flat screen TVs.
For flat screen LCD TVs.
And because they're not LED, they're not LED TVs.
Yeah.
Don't say that. They're LCD TVs with an LED black backlight.
I have to say, I rail about this all the time.
Okay, so you're not going to edit that out, because
No.
that just drives me bonkers. But the mini LEDs are indeed minier than a regular LED, which means you can have more of them, and the more of them that you can, that gives you more dimming zones, FALD zones.
Yep.
So that's important. They're just not as small, and that means you can also have more of them. They're brighter. And the evidence of that at the show was the TCL 115-inch flat panel display, which was at CES to be sure, but it is interesting. It's a 115-inch TV, for crying out loud.
Yeah.
That's something for what you would call the CEDIA, the custom market. And for the first time, TCL was on the floor with a fairly large presence in Denver, and the set looked really, really, really good.
I remember when Panasonic first came out with a 102-inch plasma. And people were saying, oh, you got to build the house around it. How do you get it into the house?
Well, but it bends in the middle.
Only once.
You've heard that before.
Yes,
But they sold an enormous number of those, because at that point in time, there was no other way to get a high brightness display. And I know they sold as many for commercial applications than they did for consumer, because lobbies and transportation terminals and all of that. And that was the forerunner of, now the 115, okay, that's sort of an outlier, but Sony and LG and Samsung all have 97 or 98-inch LCDs, right, backlit, micro LED, backlit LEDs, and they sell, that is a fave in the CEDIA world.
Yep.
And OLED, lest I forget, OLED was there, and the Sony award-winning from the blah blah off, worldwide video thing, they were there, and LG's booth was all OLEDs.
All OLED. Mm-hmm.
So that's still very viable.
Yeah. Now, there's one thing I wanted to mention here. We were talking about quantum, and you mentioned this in the last episode, and I just wanted to bring it up again. They were talking about brightness in commercial cinema, and you took a picture of this thing that I thought was cool. So let's take a look at that. So give us what we got here.
So you've got SDR, 48 nits, and again, I did not make this up. This is quantum slide. So that's what you see on the screen at an AMC or a Regal or an IMAX, because you can only push so much light in a big theatrical auditorium room.
Right, with a 30 or 40 foot screen.
Right. EDR, extended definition to dynamic range. I haven't heard that before, but okay. But that's Dolby Vision, which you'll see at a Dolby Vision AMC, or when we used to go, to the TV Academy where they had the Christie projectors. Right. That's Dolby Vision, 108 nits. But now the standards have been changed so that you can do DCP at 300 nits HDR, but don't tell Barry Sonnenfeld. Because of sex. Honest to goodness, he could be Larry David. It's really strange. Yeah. But he's now, Quantum is the only one who does that. But you can see, and okay, fine, this is their promo slide, but it shows the difference that you get as you get HDR. Sorry, Barry.
Yeah. I'm not with Barry on this one. I'm totally in with HDR. I love it. I love the way it looks. And I can't wait to see a 300 nit cinema presentation. Well,
they are putting one, I think, in red, which, by the way, bought whose camera business did they buy? Nikon bought red, but in the in one of the screening rooms in LA, they're going to put in a quantum media wall.
Oh, man.
They're going to do a press briefing on it, and you can bet that
you'll be there.
I wrote my name and address on the arm of the PR lady. Mm-hmm. You better invite me.
Okay, a couple other video products that weren't displays that we want to talk about. Kaleidoscape recently introduced their new Strato V movie server, which is similar to their other movie server, Strato C, I think. And basically, this is what they're calling a lower cost Kaleidoscape server. It has enough storage in it, in local storage within it, for 10 4K movies.
But if you're only going to store 10 movies, what are you getting that for? Now, you can add on more storage.
You can add on a lot more storage.
And they were talking about people buying these things with terabytes or petabytes of storage. I mean, right. Every movie ever made. But again, that's the nature of the constituency at CEDIA. And there are people that have those.
Right. In this case, though, the Strato V is under $4,000, which is probably half the cost of their other server models. So they're trying to aim a little lower.
And what they point to, and as did in all of the big demos, that the way they have things mastered and packaged and put together is that the audio and video is really good. And I come from an era where I used to do CRT projector demos, I won't tell you how many years ago, and we were glad to have DVDs. But now everybody was using Kaleidoscapes except for Synthesis and Trinov and Quantum when they play stuff off a DCP server.
Right. And we should say that Kaleidoscape, for those who might not be familiar with it, is a movie server. You buy a movie, you download it into either this Strato V or more likely a Tera server, which will have terabytes of storage.
Yep.
You download the movie into it, and you've bought it. It's like a Blu-ray or something. And you can play it on your system, and it's much higher quality than any streaming.
Right.
So that's a good thing. So they're trying to aim a little lower in the price point.
Right. So I mean, and how are people watching movies these days? So
mostly streaming.
There you go. I still have my Oppo.
Yeah, so do I. And speaking of Oppo Ultra HD Blu-ray player, what might be called a universal disc player, another player that has recently appeared on the market and was there at the show is Magnetar. They have the UDP 800 and UDP 900. And here you took a picture of it with some of the guts showing. Yeah, and,
it ain't cheap, but if you want a true high-end audio and video physical media player, this is really, the only thing in that space right now. And it's got a separate over in the right. It's kind of hard to see. Sorry, I thought I sent a top-down shot. But on the right-hand side, where you see those two big caps, that whole side is all the 2-channel audio output with a separate DAC with an ESS 9038, which is ESS's top-line DAC, story for another show. And then in the middle, they have the multi-channel output and the isolated power supply over on the other side. And a Sony, they're probably the only ones that make a good laser sled for that. So, this is one of those, as back in the day, Curtis Mathis, anybody remember that?
I do.
Their advertising slogan was, most expensive TV set in the world, and damn proud of it. And damn well worth it.
Damn well worth it, I think was the phrase.
Damn well worth it. And especially if you want something with a lot of wood and a 21-inch CRT too. But this was expensive and damn well worth it. And they have sold I spoke to the fellow, they've sold quite a few of them.
The lower end, UDP 800, is $1,600, and the flagship UDP 900 is $3,000. So they're hoping, and I'm hoping too, that physical optical discs aren't dead yet.
Well, reports of optical discs' death are greatly exaggerated. It is worth noting that they did go back and reprint the Oppenheimer Ultra HD Blu-ray twice.
Really?
So they sold a lot of them.
Oh, wow. Okay, so people are still buying. For the
guy that shot it on 70 millimeter IMAX.
True.
And I don't know if you've talked about this at all, but I can't help but mentioning that when they played it in the TCL Theater in Hollywood, or what used to be called Hollywood and Highland, they had to expand the projection booth because the platter, to fit the movie for 3 hours, they had to build an extension to the projection booth.
For the film platter, the platter of actual physical film.
And because he's as Barry Sonnenfeld said, because he's Christopher Nolan and he can do whatever he wants, like not do any automatic ADR, and that's why nobody could understand the damn dialogue.
Well, that's a whole nother episode of Home Theater Geeks.
But they had to make for him, because it had never been made before, 70 millimeter for IMAX perf black and white film.
Wow.
So he is that much of a purist. I apologize for going off topic, but he is that much of a purist that he didn't want to shoot the scenes he wanted in black and white and color and then grade them out down to black and white. He had enough pull that he got somebody, probably whoever is Kodak now, to make 65 millimeter black and white
and white film.
Because he can. And he did.
Okay, two last products here, both of them video processors, and again, both of them aiming at a somewhat lower price point than people are used to. I was
really surprised when I saw the prices for these things.
Yeah, the Lumigen Radiance Pro 4140.
Yep.
It's a video processor used by a lot of different people. This one is $5,500. They're usually probably twice that. I don't remember exactly, but they're a lot more expensive than that. So this one is aiming at a lower price. And the other one is the Mad VR NV Core.
Yep.
Which this picture was taken by Eric Wesley at Audio Video at AVS Forum. And that's $6,000. So that's certainly half of what a Mad VR processor normally costs.
And they both looked good. And just for historical comparison, my friend Rich Green, who received the Lifetime Achievement Award this year, in the little intro reel, hi, I'm Rich Green, blah, blah, blah. And I've been in this business so long, and he reaches over and he pulls up a Ferrugia line doubler. But I bring that up to say, if you remember when, and I do, what a Ferrugia line doubler cost and what it did, and we thought that was the greatest thing in the universe.
Yep.
And compare it, albeit 40 years later, to to a Lumigen or a Mad VR, we've come a long way.
We've come an awfully long way. Yeah. And as I often say, digital technology starts off expensive and ends up being cheaper if it's popular enough. And
I don't remember what a Ferrugia line doubler cost.
Oh, it was 5 figures easy.
Okay, so there you go. What did the old line doubler, at one point they actually had a line quadrupler, what did those cost? The Lumigens, forgetting, today's money versus their then money, but it has the same sticker price, but look what you're getting. Cowabunga.
Tremendously much more, just infinitely more almost. So yeah, it's pretty amazing.
But we digress.
We digress. And here we are, though, at the end of this episode, which is part 2 of our 3-part coverage of CEDIA. I do hope you will tune in next week for part 3 when we talk about audio products. So once again, Mike, thanks so much for being here.
My pleasure.
And we'll see you next time. As always, if you have a question for me, please send it along to htg@twit.tv. I love answering those questions on the show. And we thank you for your support of the TWiT network with your membership in Club TWiT, which gives you access to all the Club TWiT, the TWiT network shows, and in their video form. So you can check out all the cool graphics that are shown on this show and all the others. So we hope you will consider joining. Until next time, geek out.